Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. Sorry, I'm living in the desert. So it's 80 degrees during the day, 40 at night, and my voice is crackly this morning. But Matt, yesterday, Monday at noon, free agency, teams can begin to negotiate. We know on Wednesday, tomorrow is the big day when free agent contracts and all that can be signed. I want to spend a lot of time with you here, real quick, digging in on the state of the Raiders. Now, I'm sure you saw my Monday mock draft where I know this. I don't think the Raiders will move any higher than number 5. The cost is too high when you have too many needs. And you know this with Dave Ziegler, he is going to always be thinking about the future. And you don't mortgage the future unless you're a player away. I think that's something that Raider fans, I know that Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels have taken a lot of heat. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have. I'm not saying there wasn't things you could question. But if you step back and you're an honest fan, you can't punish Dave and Josh for years of basically failure. And I know that the Raider Nation hates the Patriots. But if you're stepping back and being honest, I think that's one thing that the Raiders have with Dave Ziegler. That's a big blessing. You saw John Gruden reach for a Damon Arnett, which was a stupid pick. You may remember you and I were doing a podcast at the time. I wasn't even covering the Raiders. I was getting ready to, but I wasn't covering the Raiders. And we talked at length. I told you then, everybody around the Big Ten knew the problems with Damon Arnett. I knew multiple NFL boards that had Damon Arnett off their draft board so that if he had fallen to the 7th round, they wouldn't pick him and the Raiders reached. I understand all of that. But if you're a Raider looking for things to be at least encouraged by, you got to look at Dave Ziegler. He's, even though all the heat's on him, he's always going to be thinking about the future. And with them not willing, I don't believe willing to go up past 5. I think the top 4 quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and CJ Stroud, will all be gone. I think they're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what people around the league feel. They get to stay at 7. And so on my first mock draft, my second mock draft, which came out yesterday, the Monday mock draft, I had Jalen Carter dropping and the Raiders getting him. What'd you think about that? If you're the Raiders, obviously he had some off-field issues. I've talked to a lot of people. They don't think he's a bad guy. They just think sometimes makes some bad decisions. What do you think of the Raiders, who desperately need defensive tackles, getting a Jalen Carter at 7?
Well, I love the fit from a player perspective, without a doubt. I think that he would instantly make their defense a lot better. He might be the safest pick in this draft, the guy who is, most likely to come in and have an impact from day one. I can't, I just know what's been said, what's been reported about his potential off-field stuff, and it doesn't seem like it's issues in the locker room per se or with his teammates. It might just be some decision making. Obviously, we know about the what he may or may not have been his involvement in the fatal car crash that killed his teammate and one of the Georgia recruiting staffers. If there was talk that he might have been racing or had more involvement in it than had previously been reported. So if the Raiders are confident in his judgment as a person and what he'll do off the field, I think it's a great pick. Now, they have to do all their due diligence and then some, because you're talking about dropping a young guy with a ton of money in Las Vegas. And
Yep.
that's something that no other team in the league has to deal with. Yeah, there's other big cities, there's LA, there's Miami, there's New York, so there's stuff like that. But Vegas is Vegas. It's a different world. I know from just myself, if you drop me with a lot of money in my early 20s in Vegas, it would be tough to keep my head screwed on straight, let alone a guy with millions of dollars playing at the NFL level. So I think they obviously have to be very careful about dotting all their I's, crossing the T's with Jalen Carter. But I think from a player's perspective, he would be a home run pick and a home run fit there at 7.
Interesting thoughts by you. All right, let's talk about the free agent period. There's a lot of things going on at the time of this recording because we know sometimes these recordings last a long time and people see them later. But it opens tomorrow. When you look at the Raiders, there's a plethora of needs, but there also is a lot of really good working pieces. Let's just start on offense. We got Kolton Miller, who's a stud. That's a guy, a left tackle. That's a stud. You've got a Dylan Parham, which showed a lot. I think you can build with a Dylan Parham. I think there's a lot of other players, that it's going to be interesting because of his contract. I just don't see Andre James being here unless he reworks the deal. That's not a slam on Andre James. It's just the reality of his contract. They've got some issues on the offensive line, but it is an offensive line that just blocked for the NFL's leading rusher. You got Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, Devontae Adams. There is a ton of weapons on this team. Forgot about Jakob Johnson, the fullback. There's a ton of weapons on this offensive team. They need some guys. They need some offensive linemen. But this isn't a place that is void of talent, is it, Matt?
No, it's not. I don't think it's a team. It's a team that even if they are rebuilding some, they're not starting from scratch. They're beyond that point. I think on offense, it's obviously a matter of whether it's free agency or the draft or both. Settling the QB position is paramount. And then I think you need to shore up the offensive line. Maybe you're looking for another option at tight end if you think that Darren Waller, if you're worried about his health down the line or worried about his contract. Foster Moore obviously did a pretty good job filling in for him, but a lot of teams use the second tight end, so you might need to look for a tight end somewhere.
Remember, this is the Josh McDaniels offense that uses a lot of tight ends.
Right, exactly. And offensive line, of course, you said, well, they have a couple pieces there, and one, Kolton Miller, was really good. You can never go wrong shoring up your offensive line, and they have to do that in some spots. So that's an area where they could be active. But offensively, it's not like it's a barren wasteland or an empty cupboard.
Yeah, that's why in yesterday's mock, you saw defensive lineman in the first round, offensive lineman in the second round, corner in the third. It was that needs. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Everyone, what they have in Max Crosby. You just know what they have. Chandler Jones did not perform. Had a terrible season based upon his contract. You desperately need an upgraded defensive tackle. You've got a Nate Hobbs, which showed promise his rookie year, did not show as much his second year. And that concerns me because that tells me coaching. Because then you look at a Trayvon Moehrig, that was almost a Pro Bowler his rookie year at safety and went backwards. So the defensive backfield went backwards, but Josh McDaniels kept the coach. You trust Josh McDaniels. It's his staff. He doesn't want to get fired. But they need a safety. They need some corners. Desperately need linebackers. Denzel Perriman is a difference maker, but he's injured all the time. And that's why they were able to get him here. And your best ability is availability. So your thoughts on what you think the Raiders will, need to do on that defensive side of the ball?
Well, I think the one good thing for the Raiders is that it seems like this free agent class has a bunch of different options at linebacker, particularly inside linebacker. So there's a few intriguing players. I don't know exactly how they would fit each in the Raiders scheme, but some guys out there like TJ Edwards from the Eagles. If I think Levante David would want to stay in Tampa Bay, but a player like that, David Long, some Aziz Alshire, a linebacker from the Niners who could possibly fit. Like there's some different pieces on this free agent market that would fit in the linebacker spot for the Raiders if that's the direction they choose to go. On the perimeter, there's always the possibility of upgrading At corner, you could go high for Jamel Dean or someone like that. Maybe you go for a James Bradbury if you want another vet on a short-term deal. I'm not, again, these are guys that I don't know the Raiders' evaluations of these certain players. I'm just thinking of guys I know that are available that would fit what they're looking to do. To me, I feel like my philosophy when I look at how teams that need corners, what I think is kind of the best way to do it is I always think that whether you go spend big for a vet or in free agency, either spend big for a vet that you really have conviction on, or bring in a couple of bodies for bang for your buck at that position, and then go draft a player that you really like that you can develop.
All right. I want to talk to you about Chandler Jones for a minute because a lot of fans, and you and I are not Raider fans. We're NFL media. We cover the media. Now, I want to make it very clear. I have friends that play on almost every team or coach on almost every team or in management of almost every team. I cover Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels every single day. Like a lot of fans that hate them because they're Patriots or they're just mad because the team has been inept for so long. I get that. But you and I's job is to be objective. That's what if we do our job right, people should never know where we think about a player or a person. They should just know the facts. And when you look at Chandler Jones, a lot of people have been very critical because the Raiders signed him and he was terrible last year. But there were a lot of teams that wanted Chandler Jones. He was coming off a very productive year. He had been successful. Sometimes you just don't know when guys take the descent. You don't know if there's something in their personal life that took the descent. You don't know if it was just a change in maybe a little bit of how a coach wanted something done. I blame the Raiders for picking Damon Arnett.
Right.
I blame the Raiders for a lot of choices they made over the last several years. I'm not putting the blame on the Raiders for Chandler Jones. A lot of people wanted him. There was no signs. There were no reasons. There's nothing off the field. He's a great guy. There was no signs of any of this happening. To me, that's just the game of the National Football League. What do you think of that?
I think when you look at that type of signing, I think it made a lot of sense for the Raiders on
Sure
paper.
did.
You have a guy who played in New England, who Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler know well, so they know what he's like personally and professionally. Had a great year the year before, so it wasn't like he was visibly declining or his numbers have been dropping. And the Raiders last offseason were in a different position than they are this offseason. Last offseason, they're coming off a 10-win season, wild card berth, looking like a team that was wanting to take the next step from playoff team to playoff contender. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways to do that is you go get vets that have reputations for being great players and vets that have been productive, and you may be willing to pay them a lot of money, or maybe it's an overpay or whatnot, but you take that chance there because you think that they have the ingredients for you to take the next step. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, but I don't think the logic of signing a Chandler Jones wasn't there. I think it was a logical signing. It just didn't really work out.
What did you think of the Bears Panthers trade for number one overall? I mean, we told everybody here what it would cost, and it was expensive. But what do you think of it? I thought the Bears did really well.
I did too. I thought that obviously they got some great assets in the deal. You have two first round picks, including a top 10 pick this year. You have another second rounder down the road. You have another pick, a day two pick mixed in. You have DJ Moore, who's a really underrated receiver and has had a very solid start to his career despite a lot of quarterback upheaval in Carolina. So I think the trade was a home run for the Bears because now you give Justin Fields some more pieces, some more weapons, and you think that this is your guy to be your franchise quarterback. And here's the thing: Justin Fields is going into his third year. He showed a lot of improvement in his second year. And a buddy of mine mentioned this to me over this past weekend, and he got me thinking. this makes sense for the Bears because even if Justin Fields doesn't have a great third year, and it looks like they said, maybe we do want to replace this kid. If the Bears have a pretty high pick on their own, and then they have that Carolina pick for 2024, they can move up to put themselves in position to get the franchise guy they want as a quarterback in 2024. So I think that it gives them a couple of different pathways. It either says, we have Justin Fields, he's our guy, he continues to show it, and we have things to build around him. Or if Justin Fields doesn't take the next step or two, now we can kind of mitigate that by using those assets to go get the quarterback we want.
I was talking to a couple of NFL executives over the weekend, and I've shared this with you before. I've talked about it on the podcast. They don't think there's one quarterback in this class who is Peyton Manning, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck. There's just not one guy that is a franchise guy. They said next year there could be 2, maybe 3 of those guys. And they said the quarterback class from last year to this year is not even comparable.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, talking about the move that the Carolina Panthers made. I just found it fascinating to me. Okay, I want to go to the Raiders real quick for one last question, and then we're going to be done for today. But when you look at the Las Vegas Raiders, this is a team that, you said it, they're not building from scratch, but they are rebuilding. I think there's enough tools on this Raiders team to get to the playoffs next year if they handle things right. So here's my question. Jimmy Garoppolo or Jarrett Stidham? Now, they've made it clear without saying it, we're not Jarrett Stidham guys. He came here in the last year of a deal. They didn't extend him. When Derek Carr was injured early, twice, they made him just hand off the football. Didn't even let him try to do anything. Then, the season's over. You listen to Josh McDaniels, it's, we're going to evaluate. Then you hear Dave Ziegler at the combine. Well, we would like to have Jarrett Stidham around. Clearly, without saying it, they're making it clear. And I wrote earlier in the year, if Jarrett Stidham's your guy, they're disappointed because that's not the guy that they're anticipating. But, Matt, I can't wrap my arms around it. Jimmy Garoppolo is a really good quarterback. I have no issues with Jimmy. He's great in the locker room. He is a guy that's going to be great in the community. All of that is Derek Carr. The only difference between him and Derek Carr, they have essentially the same arm. The only difference between him and Derek Carr is that Derek Carr plays injured, is always available. Jimmy is always injured. To me, to let Derek go, and for basically the same amount of money, it's going to be a few $1 million difference, but not a lot. Bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, to me, makes zero sense. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm not a guy. I like Derek. I would consider Derek a friend. But I'm not a guy that thought he was perfect. I didn't blame the Raiders for moving on if you could have made it some better adjustments. But to trade, basically, take out Derek Carr and put in Jimmy Garoppolo. If Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured next year for any amount of time, the headline of my article is going to be, told you so. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me logically. Does it to you?
I think that, again, and you talk about if they make certain moves, they could be a playoff team potentially. Jimmy Garoppolo on the field gives them a better chance to be a playoff team than Jarrett Stidham does. But
Agreed.
Where I agree with you is that it doesn't seem to make sense for them because if you give up, to me, I think if you're in the NFL, and I understand sometimes, the relationship could just run its course. It might have been better for the Raiders and Derek Carter to both move on. Both parties needed a change. But
and I do feel that way, by the way.
Right. I think so too. But I always feel like if you move off a good quarterback in the NFL, a Derek Carr, there's 2 ways that you can go. Either you move off that good quarterback and go get a great one and say, we are all in, we're going, and that's where they wanted to go if Tom Brady was still going to play. You could do that, or you say, I'm going to move off this good quarterback and we are going to take our lumps and we are going to, not worry about the future, build for the future, get a rookie in here, or not worry about even getting a rookie this year, but look towards getting a rookie in 2024. Really punt on 2023, for lack of a better term, I guess. I think tanking is, I don't like the term tanking necessarily because it's so hard to tank in football because there's 11 guys in the field at one time. Guys are playing hard. They're not going to, they're not trying to lose. But the front office and the team can certainly say we are not really focused on this year. We're looking to the future. So I think that the two best options for the Raiders would have been to either get a great quarterback to replace your good quarterback, or kind of tear it down a little bit, or look more towards 2024. Garoppolo would signal to me that 2023 is still a year they think they can make a little bit of noise. But then it doesn't make sense that you moved off Derek Carr. Like it'd be weird. It would be like kind of spinning your wheels in place.
I'm going to tell you this. If you could have told me that you guaranteed me that Jimmy Garoppolo would be healthy for all 17 regular season games, I would have made the switch from David.
Yes.
I mean, from Derek to Jimmy. I realize they're essentially the same. I think there needed to be a divorce. Jimmy knows the system. So this has nothing to do with Jimmy.
Right.
But with his track record of getting injured every year, to me, it's the Raiders taking a risk that's just not necessary. It's going to be fascinating if they go that direction. It's going to be fascinating to see. Well, Matt, next week, we're going to have a lot of free agency to talk about.
Yes, we will.
Thank you for joining me on Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with you as always. Matt is with thespun.com, my colleague. He's the editor and publisher. Man, I love thespun.com. It's one of my favorites. I read it every single day because it's just the entire world of sports. It's just fun. How would you describe the Spun? I'm going to tell you this. My grandmother used to make a soup that she just called, it was just the soup. And what she would do is she would dump in it leftover pork chops, leftover vegetables. It wasn't like a cream of broccoli or whatever. It was just everything that was left over went in there. And it was, I know it sounds disgusting. And maybe because it was my grandma, I thought it was good. But that's the Spun. I mean, it's everything everywhere. Am I wrong?
No, I agree. I mean, you look this week, we'll have NFL free agency stuff. We'll have trades. We'll have obviously the March Madness NCAA tournament, but we'll also have some baseball. We'll have some soccer stuff. We'll have some NHL. We'll have spring college football. We'll have stuff up from the upcoming swimsuit edition. Probably we'll have be all over the place.
I'm sure they're going to have to really twist your arm there, Helena.
Exactly. MMA, boxing. You never know. Anything that's viral or trending or somewhat important and getting discussed in the world of sports is something we'll write about.
I'm going to ask you real quick. I'm predicting the Purdue Boilermakers to cut down the nets and win the national title. How about you?
I think that I am honestly worried about, and we could have a whole show on the bracket. I am worried about Purdue's matchup in the second round against either Memphis or FAU because the reason why, if you watch Purdue this weekend, they had a lot of trouble with pressure. They had trouble against Rutgers. They had trouble against Penn State against the press. And if Memphis and FAU are able to push them and push the tempo and make them uncomfortable, it could be an issue. If Purdue gets by that round, then I think the matchups are good for them because they could get Tennessee or Duke in the Sweet 16, say. And then if you look at the bottom of their bracket, it's not exactly any team that jumps out at you and says, it's a major hurdle to climb. So
I got Purdue cutting the nets if they get past the second round, because if they don't, they're Purdue. But Purdue, if they get past the second round, who's your pick?
Right now, and this could change by the time the tournament starts, but right now, first glance at the bracket, and I know it's hard to repeat, but I got Kansas. Bill Self is going to be back there. I got Kansas.
I hate Kansas. for all the right reasons. All right, buddy. Appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Hold the line. I want to talk to you real quick.
No
That
problem.
is the great Matt Halatic from thespun.com.